All right, Debate Kansas City students, Gabe Cook here as part of our continuing series, The Speeches of Policy Debate. Now, you've already heard the first negative rebuttal from me today, but in the spirit of spring training beginning, I'm going to give you a double header. We're going to go back to back with the 1NR and now with the 1AR, the first affirmative rebuttal. It's a very difficult speech in a debate round. As I mentioned before, you're going to have to answer anywhere from 8 to 13 minutes of arguments in anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. It depends on if we're using weeknight or full weekend times. So basically, the negative team just got through with the block. They made a whole bunch of arguments for either 8 or 12 minutes, and you have to stand up and answer those arguments in 3 or 5 minutes. So there's a lot of time pressure on you in this speech. But if you follow my 5 tips, hopefully you'll give a very good first affirmative rebuttal. All right, so let's check out step number 1. This happens before the speech, before the debate round, before the tournament. Know the 1AC. What do I mean when I say know the 1AC? You need to know all the evidence inside and out so that you can cite the authors of the evidence by name, the facts and statistics from the evidence without hardly thinking about it. If you know that evidence, that means you can use it against negative attacks. If they make some argument about the cost of your plan, you'll quickly be able to say, well, you know what, our Johnson evidence in 2007 said that our plan is only going to cost X amount of dollars. That's not that expensive, and it would be a value for the American people. That would be an example of what it might sound like. If you know the first affirmative constructive, then rather than reading new evidence to answer negative arguments, you'll be able to figure out what evidence you've already read that answers negative arguments. So it's very important that you know the first affirmative constructive and that you use evidence you've already read in your speech to respond to negative attacks. Know the 1AC inside and out. It'll make your job a lot easier in the 1AR. All right, step number 2. Flow. I forgot to mention this in the first negative rebuttal series. You need to flow as the first negative rebuttal. You need to flow every speech. And if you're the first affirmative rebuttal, you especially want to key in on the 2AC and then the negative block in response. You want to make sure that you get all the arguments because you have a lot to cover, but it's still your goal to cover everything in the speech, cover all the arguments made. And if you didn't flow all the arguments, it's going to be hard to cover all the arguments. So flow. Write down the arguments made so that you know what arguments you need to answer. Very important to being a successful debater. All right, now let's check out step number 3, and this is really one of the goals of the first affirmative rebuttal. To extend 2AC arguments. All right, so the way the debate round works, remember, you laid out the case when you gave the first affirmative constructive. Then the negative team in the first negative constructive laid out a whole bunch of attacks. Your partner, the second affirmative constructive, would have attempted to respond to all of those attacks. Then the negative team has the block, where they have the opportunity to hit back against the affirmative. What you have to do is use the arguments your partner made in the second affirmative constructive as the framework for your speech. And let me give you an example. Let's say that the negative team ran an economy disadvantage. And in the 2AC, your partner made 5 or 6 responses. What you want to do is figure out the best of those responses and extend them. You don't have to extend every argument made by your partner, but you should extend the best arguments made by your partner. So in the 1AR, when you got to the economy disadvantage, it might sound something like this. On the economy disadvantage, first, I want you to extend the second argument out of the 2AC. We have evidence from the Times Tribune that is newer than theirs that proves the disadvantage is not unique because the economy is already in a terrible recession. Next, I want you to extend the fourth argument of our speech from the 2AC. Our Jones evidence says that if we turn to renewable energy, it will actually improve the United States economy, which flips back their disadvantage on itself, and they don't have a good response to this evidence. Now, I want you to extend our fifth piece of evidence from McMurtha. It says that the United States economy is never going to suffer a total collapse. It might go up and down, and we believe the economy is down now, but it won't totally collapse. Alright, so that would have been a very brief example. Hopefully that took about 30 seconds. You would have extended 3 arguments. Notice I didn't extend the first argument. I didn't extend the third argument. Maybe those arguments really didn't gain a lot of traction in the debate round. So what I want to do is I've flowed the debate round, and then I'm picking the best arguments of the 2AC and I'm extending those. Alright, that's going to make you sound consistent throughout the debate round. It's going to prevent you from reading a whole bunch of new evidence, especially if your partner's already made some good arguments. Extend those arguments, build on them. Now let's check out step number 4. Word economy. What is word economy? It means that you say the most in the fewest amount of words possible. Look, you don't have much time for this speech. You need to try and make a ton of arguments. And in order to do that, you have to be brief. You have to make your argument as concisely as you possibly can. Every word you speak is time counted against you as the clock is running down. So try to say everything you can in as few words as possible. That doesn't mean that you're using like caveman speak or something. It just means that you try to sound elegant and concise. You make your point and you move on. And that's what I'm going to do. Let's check out step number 5. The main goal of the first affirmative rebuttal. The key to the 1AR. Cover, cover, cover. You have to cover all of the speeches made by the negative team. I've told you about this block thing several times. They've got time on their side, so your goal is to just get through all of their arguments. Make some type of response to everything that the negative team said as best as you possibly can, and leave your partner plenty of arguments to work with in the 2AR. Remember, the first affirmative rebuttal, like all the other rebuttals, is not a place for new arguments. It's a place for extending and explaining. So you want to try and keep 2AC arguments alive. You want to try to beat down the arguments that the negative made in the block, and you want to make sure that you don't drop anything. If you can get through the 1AR and you covered all or nearly all of the negative arguments, you should feel really good about yourself. Alright, because it is a very tough speech. So those were 5 easy steps for how to give a first affirmative rebuttal. I hope it helps, and take care.